I'd like to first off thank my colleagues, Robin Martin, the MPP for Eglinton-Lawrence, and Gila Martow, the MPP for Thornhill, for joining me today to make this important announcement. I'd also like to acknowledge Michael Levitt from the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center for their continued stand against hate in our communities, as well as Melissa Mickle for joining as well. Thank you all for joining for today's announcement as we work to protect human rights and keep our schools safe, to create inclusive classrooms free of anti-Semitism and other forms of hate and discrimination in this province and country. It is an issue that we are all passionate about, because without question, every student in Ontario deserves a school environment, including a curriculum and other services that supports their learning and their well-being. As Minister, I'm committed to upholding and promoting human rights, as well as addressing and eradicating all forms of systemic discrimination experienced by students, families, and school communities in this province. It's why I'm so pleased today to be joined by our friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies, who, in partnership with our province, it will be providing teacher and student learning programs from kindergarten to grade 12 for educators to participate in training, along with new resources and summer camp for leadership development for our young people, for students within our schools focused on human rights promotion. A $327,000 investment and partnership will help improve the learning within our schools and the training of our teachers. It'll help us combat anti-Semitism in our homes, in our schools, and in communities right across Ontario. Because, as my colleagues Robin and Gila have reminded me, the sad reality is that anti-Semitism still blights our communities. According to Statistics Canada, in 2019, there were 296 police-reported incidents targeting the Jewish population in Canada, the largest of any religious group. Other reports have noted a record number of anti-Semitic incidents for the fourth consecutive year. It includes an 11% increase in anonymous online harassment, most of which advocated for genocide and the Holocaust denial, as well as other reports of vandalism and violence targeting Jewish people. And sadly, we've seen reports over the past months. There have been other disturbing instances of anti-Semitism as well, from open calls to violence against Jews to attacks on Jewish establishments. Anti-Semitic hate persists. Incidents such as these engender fear and insecurity, and they blatantly threaten the conditions of safety, security, and the respect that are necessary for children to learn and grow. It's unacceptable, and it's why we are making this investment. It's why we are fighting against all forms of intolerance, from Islamophobia to anti-Asian hate to LGBT hate. We will confront discrimination and fight it wherever it takes hold, including most specifically in Ontario schools. Our government recognizes the importance of learning through about the history of these injustices and the impacts they've had on generations. The knowledge is an essential part of creating positive change for the future. From the beginning, our government's mission has been to build a province where equity, where opportunity is a reality, not an aspiration. And to make that possible, the path forward is a firm, unwavering commitment to ensuring students are safe and protected. It is our pledge and our government's pledge, a legacy that we will build together in partnership with you, the families, citizens at home, with our educators, and of course our students within Ontario schools. This is how we will change the lives of future generations, and we'll do so together. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Robin Martin, the MPP for Eglinton-Lawrence, to share some words.
Thank you very much, Minister Lecce, for that very important announcement, and to the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center for taking on this very necessary work. We are lucky in Ontario and in Canada to live in one of the most accepting and tolerant societies anywhere in the world. People of all faiths and creeds and religions, a safe harbor and a beacon of hope in the world. And manifestations of hatred and intolerance are thankfully exceptionally rare. But we recognize that they do exist. And we also have to recognize that some groups are targeted more than others. As a government and as a society, we have a responsibility to stand firm against hatred and intolerance in all of its forms. And sadly, one of the most common forms of that hatred and intolerance is anti-Semitism. Last year, Ontario adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, or IRA, definition of anti-Semitism following a private member's bill that I sponsored along with my colleague, MPP Will Bauma. It was an important step in combating anti-Semitism in our province, but we still have more work to do. According to B'nai B'rith, Canada's 2020 annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents, 2,610 incidents of anti-Semitism were recorded in Canada last year, an 18% increase over 2019. And Statistics Canada most recent report on police-reported hate crimes covering 2019, which is the most recent data available, confirms that the Jewish community remains the most targeted religious community for hatred in Canada. And in recent months, we've seen a troubling rise in anti-Semitic incidents associated with the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, including Jewish-owned businesses in Toronto being targeted with physical vandalism and graffiti, or digitally with fake one-star reviews on Google and other review sites. Unfortunately, our schools are not immune to this hatred or intolerance either, and today's much-needed investment will empower educators and students with the necessary tools and knowledge to combat anti-Semitism in our public school system. So I want to again thank Minister Lecce for moving forward with this very important announcement and for his steadfast commitment to combating anti-Semitism in our education system and in our society. And I again want to thank the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Centre for their ongoing leadership role in combating hatred and anti-Semitism across Canada. And we will all continue to support you, Michael Levitt, and the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal in this important work. And I'd just like to take now the opportunity to introduce my very dear friend and colleague, Thornhill MPP, Gila Martow. Gila?
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you very much, everybody who took time out of their busy day to join us today. I've represented Thornhill for over 7 years, and it's the largest Jewish community in a riding across Canada. And I became a de facto ambassador, I guess you could say, for the Jewish students on campus and for the entire Jewish community, not just here in Ontario, but across Canada. People have contacted me many times over the years. I guess partly I'm pretty visible, not just because it's such a heavily populated Jewish riding, but because my first name, Gila, means joy in Hebrew. My mother was born while her parents were volunteering to create the state of Israel. My late mother was born in Nazareth, in a hospital in Nazareth, during the British-Palestinian Mandate. So my family's history is very, very tied to the state of Israel, to the Jewish community. I went to Jewish day school. I spent a year in Israel. I speak Hebrew, as many people in the Jewish community do. But the Jewish community isn't just about European Jews or Israeli Jews. I know Jews in Thornhill, not just from South Africa and the former Soviet Union and Israel, but we have Jews from India, where the parents and the grandparents, the women wear saris, and they have certain customs that they brought from India. So there's a lot of discussion very often outside the Jewish community, inside the Jewish community. Why do we have anti-Semitism? How far back does it go? Does it go before the creation of Christianity, which of course it does? Is the Jewish community, is it a race? Is it a religion? And I'm hoping that this program, I know Friends of Simon Wiesenthal and Michael Levitt, of course, are going to do a fantastic job. They recognize that this is taxpayers' money, and they're going to ensure that the money is being used appropriately and addressing all the concerns that we hear within the community and outside the community. I know that Friends of Simon Wiesenthal collaborates with the other Jewish organizations. Many have also gotten grants, summer camps have gotten grants to also do some programming. And I think that in a broader context, we need to have those discussions. Just why is there so much intolerance still, not just to the Jewish community, but of course to the Muslim community, Indigenous communities, Asian communities? Is it coming from within, other organized communities? That maybe we need to collaborate with those organizations from the other communities to help them, and so they can help us? Do we need to address some of the mental health challenges that arise from intolerance and hatred. I know that there's been studies done that there's post-traumatic stress disorder from generations and generations of anti-Semitism and physical and emotional attacks. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about the program. I was just contacted the past week about programming for the children of survivors of the Holocaust through Friends of Simon Wiesenthal. Somebody asked me if I'd heard of the program specifically focused in Kitchener-Waterloo and Toronto. And I'm just very happy to see that sort of creativity and thinking outside the box of getting as few survivors left. So thank you to the Ministry of Education and Mr. Lecce. Thank you to Friends of Simon Wiesenthal, and doesn't stop pushing their politicians and their community leaders to do the right thing. So I'm going to take this opportunity, of course, to introduce Michael Levitt, who we all know and respect so much. Michael, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, MPP Martow, Gila, MPP Martin, and Minister Lecce, of course. I also want to recognize my colleague from the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Centre, Melissa Michael, our Director of Education, who is joining me this morning and who is leading the development of our new programming. Combating hate in all its forms starts with education. Our organization's namesake, Simon Wiesenthal, a Holocaust survivor and Nazi hunter who dedicated his life to the pursuit of justice, believed fervently in the power of education as a means of breaking the cycle of hate. This is the work that the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Centre does every day, in recent times, both in person and virtually. Last year alone, we worked with more than 26,000 Ontario students on virtual platforms, teaching lessons of inclusion, justice, and human rights. Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Centre for Holocaust Studies is deeply grateful for the support of the Ontario government, which is providing us with funding that will help further advance our organization's work in delivering critical educational programs to Ontario students. There is no doubt that Jew hatred is growing in our society. We know this from police statistics, which show dramatic growth in the incidence of anti-Semitic hate crimes taking place. And both Minister Lecce and MPP Martow reference some of these sources. And we know this from our work in communities. Students of all ages report to us the swastikas carved in bathroom stalls and spray painted on the brick walls of their schools. We're told of the hateful anti-Semitic comments in conversations that demean, demonize, and dehumanize Jewish people, and the way that social media and gaming platforms of our young people are filled with anti-Semitic memes, videos, and messages. Our goal is to address the growth of anti-Semitic hate. The program that we are creating is two-pronged in its approach to countering anti-Semitism, which includes training both teachers and students. The programs will discuss the historical examples and include Holocaust survivors who will courageously share their personal experiences in witnessing firsthand the consequences of hate and discrimination when left unchecked. From our work with the Holocaust survivor community, we know that there is nothing more poignant nor more inspiring than the firsthand testimony of these survivors that we all care about so much. We will then connect these historical lessons to contemporary issues of anti-Semitism and hate today. We support teachers with lesson plans and pedagogical tools to support their teachings. For students, we work to develop critical thinking skills alongside a collection of tools that they can in turn use to create positive change in their homes, schools, and communities. This has been the long-standing work of the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Centre, and I'm incredibly proud of our education team that is bringing these new programs to schools and educators over the summer months. I want to once again thank the Ontario government for valuing education and for training students and teachers in ways to combat anti-Semitism, hate, and discrimination. As Simon Wiesenthal said, the history of man is the history of crime, and history can repeat. So information is a defense. Through this, we can build we must build a defense against repetition. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael.
So we'll now go to the phone lines for questions. Just a reminder, it's one question and one follow-up. First question.
From Lorenda Redekop at CBC.
Hi there, Minister. I have a question on another topic. I know it's only the beginning of summer holidays, but a lot of parents are wondering, what is school going to look like in September, particularly for the younger students who can't be vaccinated? Will there be minimum standards, for example, when it comes to ventilation in schools, or might smaller class sizes be required? What are you looking at?
For sure. Yeah, we have been working on our back to school program for September for many months with Dr. Williams, the former Chief Medical Officer of Health, and actively with Dr. Moore, the current Chief Medical Officer of Health, with one aim, which is to return all children back into class full-time in person, where we believe they will benefit from. The fact that vaccine rates are rising, obviously aggressively, 46% plus of the Ontario population is double vaxxed, over 78% has a single dose. This gives us an incredible sense of confidence that the communities that our schools are surrounded in will be safer. And so we're going to continue to encourage high vaccine rates. We've asked for, and working with the Chief Medical Officer of Health, who will be sharing final guidance with the ministry in the coming weeks. We will provide that to parents with the intention of restoring extracurriculars, sports, clubs, and a more social, interactive, yet continuing to be safe learning experience. This morning, I spoke with the chair of the Medical Officers of Health Council, who himself is a pediatrician, who advised us, and confirmed again that the school system in Ontario has been safe. Our intention is to keep it safe with high vaccine rates for those children 12 plus, with low cases in the community. We know absolutely we're going to be able to return kids back to class. And the Chief Medical Officer of Health is working now on the guidance, the final guidance on what we can do to maintain the safety of schools. What I will say on air ventilation is Ontario has $450 million in active air ventilation projects underway, supporting over 2,000 projects in over 1,000 schools. We have improved over 96% of air ventilation systems going back to last October, to the Thanksgiving weekend of the first semester. 90% of our schools with air ventilation systems, mechanical air ventilation systems, had them recommissioned entirely or improved. And the remaining 10% that don't have HEPA units within them. In fact, in Toronto, the 25,000 classrooms that were occupied in Toronto this past year, every one of them had a HEPA filter. We have 55,000 procured in Ontario, and a significant improvement in air ventilation in Ontario. So we're very proud of the work we have already done. But we accept we're going to use this summer to go further, to make these classrooms and schools safer for the staff and obviously for the kids themselves. So we have a multi-layer approach, working with the Chief Medical Officer about, and as soon as we get that guidance, we'll confirm it, we'll release it, and provide plan and certainty to get all kids back. That's our intention, and I think we're well on our way to releasing that in the coming weeks.
Can you give some more details on changes that will be coming when it comes to teaching on Indigenous history and current context?
Yeah, I appreciate very much that question. I think there's a lot of intersections and the importance of speaking and learning about our history. In 2018 in Ontario, there was mandatory learning built in and added to Ontario's curriculum. In fact, from grades 4 to 8, as well as in grade 10, there was mandatory learning on Indigenous curriculum that includes history, culture, and better knowledge of their contributions and histories within Ontario and the country writ large. That is a significant change in 2018 that wasn't there before, and generations of students, myself included, never had that knowledge and learning that we should have had. And so we're pleased to see that improvement being made, but we're not resting on our laurels in this respect. We are actively working with, listening to Indigenous elders and leaders. In fact, we've been meeting with them for several years, as recently in January of this year, really posing a question: how can we strengthen and build upon the already now mandatory learning when it comes to Indigenous history, culture, and contributions. And we will continue to meet with them. We are doing so this summer with one aim, which is to strengthen that learning. And so right now in our elementary system, there's mandatory learning in grade 4 to 8, and we're looking at ways by which we can further build upon and strengthen that knowledge between grades 1 to 3. And we've been consulting directly with, rather meeting with and listening to Indigenous leaders and elders over the past months and years in this respect. And I think obviously given the dark chapter of history in residential schools, we have a commitment, part of our broader reconciliation agenda, to do more. With respect to residential schools, I just will note that there is mandatory learning currently in grade 7 and 8, as well as grade 10, dealing specifically with residential schools. And we think that is so appropriate. That's something that was added in 2018. And obviously a great benefit to students that we, as was mentioned by Michael Levitt, we learn from our history so we do not repeat it, as well as part of our broader commitments reconciliation. So there is a great deal of mandatory learning that has been added, and our commitment is to build upon that, working directly with Indigenous leaders in Ontario.
Next question.
From Holly Mackenzie-Suter at Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. I wanted to ask you about the vaccinations for youth that second dose accelerated bookings are open today, but I'm just wondering if there are any plans in the works to start doing kind of proactive outreach and contacting youth and families directly to rebook those appointments, just to kind of to guarantee we get more people signed up before September.
Yeah, we've seen a great rate of young people getting their first dose of the vaccine. We, in fact, expanded the school-based vaccine clinics for youth 12 and up by an additional week. Part of our aim to encourage families and young people to get a vaccine because they are safe and because they're going to materially help allow this province get back to some normal. And the vaccine is an enabler for extracurriculars and clubs and sports, things that I think a lot of young people missed this past year. And I understand why they weren't permitted to do so. But I think as we look forward, we really want to continue to get those vaccine rates up. As of today, it's just north of 58%, 58.3% of youth have their first dose. And part of today's announcement is prioritization for the second doses so that they can get those full immunization, their 2-dose summer that I know that they look forward to for a whole bunch of reasons, pedagogical and academic for sure, but even for the social benefits, which we should not discount. Young people, they deserve this, and I want them to see their friends safely. I want them to be able to be involved in extracurriculars and professional development and volunteerism in their community and service-oriented projects. And I want them to participate in sports, which I think all of us know is so important to their physical and mental health. So that's why we've created that capacity. It's why we've set aside the doses. It's why our public health units are working aggressively to promote and encourage on a voluntary basis the vaccines. And it's why today I'm just encouraging families out there to sign their child up 12 plus because by doing so, our schools will be safer and it'll allow us to create a much more normal experience that I think many of our young people long for.
Yeah, just following up on that, I mean, we know that the accelerated second doses for everyone are kind of by choice and on your own initiative. People have to go about making those bookings. And I know you talked earlier about kind of depending on community levels of vaccination to keep younger students under 12 protected when we get back to school. So I'm just wondering, now that we have so much supply and we're able to offer second doses to everyone, if this is something, yourself and cabinet is talking about, like, is it time to kind of start doing outreach with people and make it easier for them to book those doses rather than kind of leave it up to the parents, families, community members to kind of hope that they are going to sign up for the second doses?
Yeah, we are having active discussions about ways by which we can further encourage and promote the vaccine, as it is safe and it's the best defense against COVID-19. It's the best way by which we can return to to a new normal. So in short, the answer is yes, we're having discussions about ways by which we could bolster the percentage and incentivize participation. And in the meantime, we're going to continue through our school system as well as through our public health units and through local public health units to be encouraging and advertising and promoting the safe vaccines should families want one. But we'll continue to communicate additional tactics where we may employ in the coming weeks to really use every asset available to us, including our medical practitioners, to continue to promote safe vaccines.
Next question.
From Randy Rath at CHTV.
Yeah, hi, Minister. I'm just wondering, could you tell me which Indigenous leaders and elders you've been consulting with over the last so many months?
Yeah, so we've been consulting with Indigenous leaders going back, I guess back in June of 2019, commencing discussions with them about ways by which we can strengthen the curriculum. But to your question, yes, we did meet with them as recently as January of this year for a meaningful discussion about ways by which we can enhance the mandatory learning in the curriculum. As I noted earlier, in grade 4 to 8, as well as in grade 10, there is now new enhanced mandatory learning as of 2018. It answers the question of why so many of us, millennials and otherwise, never learned this. It was only added in 18, most regrettably, but our government believes we can do more. We are doing more. In July, a meeting will, the Indigenous elders will come together for a meeting and discussion with the government about how we can further strengthen the learning within the elementary curriculum, particularly between grade 1 and 3, to create a full continuum of learning between 1 and 8. With respect to the list, there's 12 Indigenous leaders or organizations we have met with to seek their perspective. I will share that with you following this. There's a list of 12 organizations, including the Chiefs of Ontario, for example, that we have been discussing with and meeting with over the past months and years. And we look forward to that discussion as we meet into July, because we really think this work must continue. We have a duty to reconciliation, and we think that this work will complement the mandatory learning in Ontario. And I think more rightfully ensure that students in Ontario learn the culture, tradition, contribution of Indigenous, First Nation, Inuit, Métis within our country.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Do you hope to have this, I guess I'd call it enhanced curriculum, ready to go by the start of the school year?
It's a discussion point we're having with Indigenous leaders. I think we have mandatory learning in the curriculum this September, as was the case last September in grade 4 to 8 and 10, and learning throughout the social studies curriculum. But we're working with them and we're going to seek their feedback. I really want them to provide advice to governments on how we can get this right, recognizing that there's a significant amount of mandatory learning in the curriculum. And we want to get this right. I mean, as you know, curriculum developments, a meaningful consultation can take some time, given the subject matter and the sensitivity. I want to work with them and get this right. So we're going to continue to have the discussion. There's another meeting point in July, and perhaps at that point we'll be better positioned to speak about the way forward, the timelines, and the implementation, which I can appreciate is important for students and likewise for Indigenous families in Ontario.
Go to the next question, and this will be the last question.
From Christina Horan at City TV. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Minister. I just want to go back to one of the questions that's been asked several times, initially started off with CBC, but when can parents expect to see a very meaningful plan in terms of what's going to be happening for children in elementary schools? Can they start to anticipate that there will be more buses on the road, for example, to allow for social distancing on their way to and from school? Or KF94 masks, something that the government is considering. What are some of the options that are already on the table?
Yeah, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Moore, is in real time giving advice and will provide final advice to the cabinet. Our school reopening plan. Our intention is to get all kids, kindergarten to grade 12, back full-time in class within our schools. We think it's important. Keep in mind that Ontario schools this past year have been safe. And we're proud of that work. We just want to make sure that we continue to keep them safe and we continue to allow for a greater emphasis on social development of children, allowing them to interact with each other, as well as participate in things like extracurriculars and sports, which we know is important, not just for their physical health, but as well for their mental health. So those are all decision points that we're working on in real time. We have what I have already announced is a $1.6 billion investment in resources to ensure schools remain safe. I've already announced an $85 million summer learning and school recovery plan, given the gaps that have emerged in reading and in math, allowing us to hire more tutors and staffing and additional supports for areas like mathematics, which we know children need more, not less of, in their lives. We've also announced a over $500 million net increase in funding for the school boards themselves for September. A few provinces have announced tentative plans with major questions like masking to be determined later. We're going to provide final guidance in the coming weeks, informed by the best medical science, to ensure our schools remain safe as they have been this year. And over the summer and the coming days, we're going to continue to implement our plan for safer air ventilation, where we have 96% of schools already realizing improvements, but I recognize there's more we are going to do, which is why we have $450 million in active projects improving air ventilation, over 2,000 projects, over 1,000 schools benefiting from this as we speak. And there's more we're going to do. And I think we'll get the advice from Dr. Moore, and we'll announce it, provide clarity, confidence, and guidance to everyone, from our students to our educators and our parents, and a pathway to get our schools open so they can stay open for the benefit of children in Ontario.
Follow up, and this will be the last.
And now that, thank you. And now that many students, or most students, will be able to have a 2-dose summer and return to school in September fully vaccinated, is your government recontemplating asking for double vaccination shots, much like children have to have for measles and all of those shots that they're supposed to get, the booster shots, and having that as a passport moving forward, perhaps not for the 2021-2022 year, but potentially for 2022-23?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, that's not the intention. I mean, it is a choice in Ontario to get a vaccine. We are encouraging it. We've made them available and accessible, and we continue to promote the safe benefits of vaccines in the context of returning to the normal, not just for ourselves, but as a society and as a country. But at this point, there is no intention to do that. Obviously, we'll continue to seek the guidance of the Chief Medical Officer of Health and other authorities on these fundamental questions. But for now, our plan for this September is encourage as many individuals to get a vaccine in the heart of their communities at local immunization clinics and pharmacies. We've increased the access points significantly over the past months. And I think the data speaks for themselves. 78% of the population has at least one dose, and roughly half, 46% to be fair, are double vaxxed. So we're making tremendous progress. We want to continue to see more young people get their vaccines. And I think the incentive for a young person is, by doing so, obviously, consulting with their families, but by doing so, it allows them to return to, competitive dance, things like sports and competitions, intramurals. These are things that, perhaps we took for granted as a society until COVID-19, but we all know how positive those experiences are to anyone, a young person or an adult for that matter. So that's why our focus is on getting the vaccine rates up, case count down, to reopen all schools and keep them open. We know how important it is this September to provide that stability, and that's going to require all of us to continue to follow the public health rules in order to achieve those benchmarks and just keep our kids learning safely in schools. I think that is it.
Everyone.